Great. So as we have I've welcomed everyone to our symposium. We've acknowledged that our main host, UBC, is on unceded lands of the Musqueam First Nations. And our structure today for this first sharing circle is that we'll have two presenters. Each presenter will share for about 10 minutes. Then we'll have 5 minutes for questions, which you can unmute and ask or put your question in the chat. That will be the main structure of our session. So to begin, I want to introduce very briefly Jess Kyle, who is a Numeracy Helping Teacher for School District 36 in Surrey. And in this presentation, Jess has based it on this question: what happens when we combine Indigenous story work with place-based math explorations? So we'll go to Jess first with 10 minutes presentation, 5 for Q&A, and then I will introduce Jennifer, our second presenter. So I think, Jess, you have some slides to share. So if you would like to share screen, that would be great.
Thanks, Joanne.
Okay. Yep, great.
So I am Jess Kyle, and I am somehow in the wrong place here in my slides. There we go. So I'm a Numeracy Helping Teacher in Surrey, and I want to acknowledge that this work that I'm about to talk about was done on the stolen and unceded territories of the Katzie, Kwantlen, Semiahmoo, and other Coast Salish nations, and also to acknowledge that this work could not have been done without the land and without the work of the story keepers.
Illusion
shared the stories that we used.
are going to share.
So we were looking at the question, what happens when you combine place-based math with Indigenous story work? And we started about 2 years ago with Joanne's Indigenous story work and with the Stolo Satel collection of stories, which were gathered from Stolo storytellers, and with this beautiful mat that was made for us by a Métis artist friend of ours, and that represents the Mount Cheam area. So it was designed to go with the whole collection, but specifically with the Mountain Goat people of Cheam. And I was working with a group called Surrey Place-Based Math, and they created a little booklet of their learning stories, and I presented on that last year. So that's how we got started. We added this mat, which is of Semiahmoo Nation's territory, and that is White Rock, if you're familiar with that area. Unfortunately, the Semiahmoo are a very small group currently, and so they only have a few publicly shared stories, and one is this one, The Legend of the White Rock, and another one that some teachers worked with was the flood story. And then we added one more mat this year, which is the Katzie mat. This is of Barnston Island, which is one of the Katzie territories here in Surrey. And for this one, we used a story called Wake Up Black Bear, which was created by a community linguist. So it's not a traditional story, but it follows the traditional storytelling ways. And it was recorded in Hinkminam, which is the downriver dialect of Hulkamelam, and by Paula Leon, who is Katzie. I don't know why I'm having so much trouble working this thing today. Okay, so we started with Indigenous story work. And the teachers approached the getting story ready in different ways. They focused on different principles. A lot of people focused on respect, responsibility, and reciprocity. But there was definitely an interest in exploring all of the story work principles in different ways. And the words in yellow are from students. So in winter, we're gathering to tell our stories, to remember our culture. We had our rights to gather taken away, and now we are singing and telling stories and happy again. And you can see the play that they've done on the mat to build that storytelling environment. And you can see it is winter and the fire keeps us warm and we tell stories. It is too cold for gathering clams and fish. So you can see that they're learning about different times of the year for gathering, different times for storytelling, different times for hunting. And one story that isn't included here is a story from an intermediate teacher who had a pretty challenging class at the beginning of the year. So she's done a lot of work with them with the story work principles and read them the stories as well as other Indigenous stories. And I was just meeting with her the other day, and she said that she had an Indigenous, one of our Indigenous knowledge keepers in to do some work with the kids. And she had introduced them as Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, and the kids had said, you know, that is not the proper way to introduce a knowledge keeper. And they spent about 15 to 20 minutes asking her about her nation, her language, all kinds of stuff. So that was a real change in how the students learned about introductions. And that teacher happens to be part of the deaf community. So she's also teaching them sign language and the culture around that. And so there was a big developing interest in language and protocols and proper ways of introducing people in different communities, which was really cool. We also, of course, explored the question, what math lives here, both in the stories and on the mats, and also in their own little areas. So whether that was a little forested area or a park near their school, their different special places. So I'm just going to read this one to you because it's a story in the teacher's own voice. They were working with the Stolo Mat and the Mountain Goat people of Chiem. A story with diverse abilities in my class has become very connected to the mats and will spend a lot of time rearranging and explaining what is happening on the mats. Having a personal Stolo mat has allowed for extensive interaction where they've been able to practice counting and see representation of topography when looking at a digital map of the land compared to the mat. They tried to build aspects onto the mat that were not there in comparison to the digital online map. They have been able to have an access point to mathematical inquiry when asked questions such as, if two goat women took the young man to the mountain, how many footsteps might you see? And this is part of the story where the mountain goat people find this young hunter and they take him to their home. There's lots of examples in here, and I'm going to make these slides available to you, but I don't have time to read every little thing, so I'm just going to pick and choose here. The experience of listening to stories shared by Chief Harley Chappell, working with the Semiahmoo story mat. Chief Harley is the Semiahmoo chief. Opened up ideas about equality. And this is equality in the mathematical sense, not referring to equity, but it could also be tied in there. As students were exploring ideas inspired by the flood story, many thought about the canoe of children and the canoe of supplies and how they might be divided equally as they moved to new areas according to food sources. One student raised the idea that maybe the supplies weren't shared equally, but according to what might be needed to gather the food source. So there is ideas of equality, but also ideas of the difference between equality and equity that are coming out in this story. His idea was that the children would have what they needed, but it would look different for each group. They would work together to create a different kind of balance. He was uncovering the idea of reciprocity, and he worked to represent and communicate his idea through the materials and a respect and reverence for the story.
We're at 7 minutes.
Okay. I think Oh, I'm just going to read you this part. This is the responses from the teachers that talk about what they got out of it. So a lot of the stories are about students, and you can read those if you're interested but I'll read this one, the teachers' responses, what they got out of it. They got challenging and supportive conversations about pedagogy, as well as inspiration from their colleagues. We are all on a learning journey, and we don't have all the answers, and that learning can be messy, but also deep and meaningful. I've enjoyed listening to my colleagues present the work that they are doing in the classrooms and helping them solve knots. I have enjoyed getting feedback and encouragement from the group. I have enjoyed using the mats and Indigenous stories. I get so much from hearing what others are working on in their classroom and approaches they are taking to inquiry place-based mathematics. Collaborating and listening to others and how math is being found in so many diverse ways inspires me. So I think that for the teachers and the students, as well as those of us who were involved, this is a really community-based experience that we all feel really close to. Where we're looking for next year is we have a new place-based school with an Indigenous focus opening in Surrey, which is really exciting. So I will get to support them. Further exploration of students' own places and stories. And gathering more Indigenous stories from our local nations where we don't have a lot of stories. And I will stop there. And any questions?
I'd just like to say how wonderful these story mats are. Like using a story and creating the story mats. It's just brilliant.
Yes, they've really been a beautiful way of helping the kids connect to those places.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I can't. I need to stop sharing.
It's just
And-
wonderful.
Yeah, and also we will have the resources that Jess would like to share put on the K-12 Indigenous Math Ed website,
Oh,
network website. So after this, you could also look at the materials in more depth. I agree, those story mats are wonderful. Jess, how did you or did someone make them for you
Yes.
specifically?
So I'm really, really lucky in that our Indigenous helping teachers, Cheryl Corrick and Allison Haughty, are close friends of mine. So I get to do lots of work with them. And they, well, Allison was working with you on the Stolo Satel collection. And so she had asked Julia to make a mat to go with the stories. And she'd selected the Mountain Goat people of Chiam. So that's how we got the Stolo mat. And then where I came on board was they had asked Julia, you know, the Stolo mat is beautiful, but we're not on Stolo territory. And that's when she made us the Semiamu mat. And that's when I got involved with the place-based math. And we just kind of expanded from there. But now Julia has a baby, and so she has retired from mat making. So that's why we're hoping that we can work on some techniques for getting the kids to use the mats, but then think beyond the mat to their own special places.
great.
Of course. Kate, you have a question?
Hi, thanks. I was just wondering, you talked a little bit about how the students interacted with the mat when they were talking about building a place for storytelling. So if you have one mat and a class of students, are the students interacting with the mat in order to build up stories and use it for math in small groups? Or can you tell us a little bit more about how the mat is actually used?
So
Please.
that really depends on the teacher. We come together at the beginning of the year and we decide who wants to use which mat for a period of time. And so then it's funny because actually The intermediate teachers have to be a lot more careful with their maths. The little ones seem to come to the respect part a little more quickly. And so with the older ones, we have to be really careful about how we're introducing the mat, whether the mat stays out or not. Many teachers only bring the mat out to either do whole class and then work in small groups. But I've also seen some teachers who will put the mat out. Can you still see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
So if you look here at this slide, you can see how this mat has been out, and this was actually moved up onto a table, and then they did this whole big extension. They were learning about the salmon and the life cycles of the salmon, and so they had extended the mat to build onto the story. So it's really teacher dependent on how those mats are integrated into the learning, but it always starts with an introduction to the mat whole class with a story, and that's how we start.
Thank you.
Joanne, you mentioned a website. What was that you?
Oh, we'll put it in the chat, Lorraine.
Okay,
Lorraine.
thanks.
Okay, yeah,
Thank you.
that's good. Jess, you talked about a question you had asked our students and thinking about wondering where math is in the story. I think you had mentioned that. Could you give us a couple examples of what students came up with? Yeah, what math lives here? I love that
what
question.
math lives here. So it really depended on the story. This year, a couple of the classes really got into, that were working with the Stolo mat, really got into that idea of topography and deconstructing the mountains and exploring elevations and stuff like that. And this is anywhere from like grade 1 to grade 5, I would say these learners are. And then of course, like so they built the mountains, some of them did, and then they sliced them up and then looked at the different layers. So really this group is very student-led. Many of them are Reggio-inspired instructors, so they work a lot off like provocations and what comes up. So when we introduce the mat and read the story, then we ask the kids what math lives here and then kind of build off of what they come up with. So you can see all kinds of things that are highlighted here, mapping and measuring temperatures. And then I've included some more, I read you this one, but some different ways that they explored patterns and representing those. And I really like this one about the idea of creativity. So not just the skills of math, but a big focus on the competencies of math. And the students, what the students' questions are.
Great. Good. Thanks, Jess. It's a wonderful project, and students obviously were very engaged in learning about the Stolo story and engaging in math ideas, and combining that with their artistic creativity too. That's great. Thank you very much. I wonder now if we could then move to Jennifer. And again, we will add the resources from the presenters to the Indigenous Math website, so you can take a look at those. So let's hear Jennifer Dionne, who is a Numeracy Helping Teacher, K-12 for School District 57 in Prince George. And Jennifer is also going to share something about Indigenous storywork principles, particularly the principles of responsibility and reciprocity, based on a project that Jennifer started with another teacher a year ago, focusing on the story, The First Salmon Run, A Bear Cub's Adventure. So Jennifer, that's here what you're going to share.
Oh, thank you, Joanne. I'm just having a little bit of trouble. I want to start my slideshow, but I have the black bar across the top, so I can't click the spot that says slideshow. Does anybody know how to help me with that?
Oh, I think it's at the bottom. I see on there's a bottom
Oh, I got
icon.
it.
Yeah.
I moved mine down. Thank you very
Oh.
much. Before I begin, I just want to thank Jess for her amazing presentation. I'm super excited about the mats, and already I'm thinking about a project for next year and how I'd be able to incorporate some of those. Hadi, my name's Jennifer Dionne, and I'm the Numeracy Helping Teacher for School District 57. When reflecting on how I got started on this journey, I know that it began with the things that I'm passionate about. While I'm sharing these passions with you, please reflect on the things that you are passionate about. I'm passionate about the unceded territory of the people of the confluence of the rivers, Lheidli. I believe math is beautiful, and we can all be math explorers. I love to connect learners and encourage them to notice that math is all around us. I'm going to briefly review a project that I supported last year to provide context to the project that I've been working on this year. In October of 2022, I was fortunate to join an amazing group of educators from around the province to participate in Indigenous, culture, community, mathematics, education with Joanne and Cynthia. I knew I wanted to weave my passions into my project. I decided to focus on finding math in Indigenous stories. Of course, I wanted a story that was connected to Lheidli. Rhonda Gerard, a local author, had recently released The First Salmon Run, The Bear Cub's Adventure. When I read the story, I immediately knew that I wanted to share its beauty with others. I approached a new classroom teacher who I had a previous connection to, and asked her if she would like to collaborate. We co-taught a unit on time, including elapsed time. We invited Rhonda to the class for an author visit. The students were in awe and asked thoughtful and engaging questions. The following day, we explored the math in Rhonda's story, including elapsed time. The students then successfully wrote their own stories about elapsed time and presented them to an audience. For more information on this project and to hear Rhonda Gerard, the author, and Sam Moray, the classroom teacher, speak, please view Finding Math in Indigenous Stories from the May 2023 Indigenous Math Symposium. In October of 2023, I was excited to once again join Joanne and Cynthia and several other educators from around the province to continue to support mathematics education through culture and community. When planning for my next project, I wanted to apply what I had been learning about the Indigenous storywork principles. The two principles that I chose to focus on were responsibility and reciprocity. I wanted to explore these principles at the mentoring level and at the classroom level. Thinking about the principle of responsibility, I asked myself, how can I develop and sustain a working relationship with teachers, other colleagues, and Indigenous family and community members? I felt it was my responsibility to build capacity amongst teachers to continue finding math in local Indigenous stories without direct support from me. I invited teachers to be part of a year-long project where we would meet formally 4 times. 8 teachers chose to participate and have been very successful with their ideas. During our 4 meetings, we explored stories that had connection to Lheidli. We explored our own cultural context. We shared the things that we had tried. We shared our ideas and our areas for growth. Here is a sample of one of the activities that we did as a group. I got this idea from one of the sessions that I attended with Joanne and Cynthia. It was an interesting reflection activity, and lots of ideas and thoughts were shared. The right-hand side represents having a high level of understanding about local Indigenous knowledge and culture. The left-hand side is you're beginning your journey of understanding. As you can see, this group of teachers felt they still had lots of growing to do. We talked about where to find out more about our local history and of resources that we have access to. And it was amazing that everybody had one or two ideas, and then just sharing them together allowed for everybody to learn from each other. One of the things that was shared, it was a resource. It was posters with the numbers 1 to 20 in Dalketh. And they actually come with a QR code that you can scan and listen to an elder reading the number. This slide shows some of the books that we read and enjoyed. All of these books have an author or an illustrator or both that have a connection to Claytley. We discussed how we could explore the author's illustrators and where our students may have seen these authors or seen some of their work. The Bear is Medicine and The Salmon Run, which are on the left-hand side of this slide, are written by Clayton Gauthier, and he's the artist that created the Sacred Salmon Journey mural that is on the front page of this symposium. Leona Prince, author of A Dance Through the Seasons and Be a Good Ancestor, was a teacher and an administrator here before she moved to School District 91, which is a neighboring district to us. Rhonda Gerard is an Indigenous education worker at a local school. So many students have been fortunate to know both of these authors in a different capacity. Through this collaboration, I feel that I've built a relationship with the teachers. My hope is that this group of teachers and myself can continue to build relationships with Indigenous families and community members. The second Indigenous storywork principle that I focused on was reciprocity. While building relationships with teachers, I wanted to be able to facilitate ways for them to listen to and learn with Indigenous stories for math education. At our initial meeting, I had several copies of the books available, the books from the slide that I shared. I encouraged teachers to connect with one of the stories and think about how students could wonder mathematically about it. We also discussed place and wondered which story could be read to connect to place. And I will refer back to this in an example in a minute. After teachers had read the stories and found one or two that they connected to, we then looked at the mathematics curriculum. As this project unfolded, I learned that we did not necessarily need to take this curriculum step, that when given permission to explore and ask questions, students will often come up with their own math connections. We hosted our third meeting at Nasdale Elementary, an Aboriginal choice school in Prince George. We explored the hallways and the gymnasium and asked ourselves and discussed what math lives here. The canoe that's on this slide is displayed in the foyer of the school, and it is the first thing that people see when entering the school. And again, this artwork on this canoe has been carved by Clayton. With her permission, I'm going to share how one of the teachers who's engaged in this project incorporated mathematics and other subjects into an Indigenous story. Leah Turner is a kindergarten teacher at Pineview Elementary, a very rural school, an area that is used to seeing bears on a daily basis. The previous school year, there had actually been 2 resident grizzly bears who often made an appearance, and black bears are seen almost on a daily basis. She chose Clayton's story, The Bear's Medicine. Clayton had visited the school to share a design that he had created for our local hockey team's jerseys. So the students could connect the idea of the author being a person that they had actually seen and met. Leah started with a plan. but also allowed for the explore activities to come from the students' interests. They learned about likely and unlikely events, and always and never when discussing food sources. Leah created a game about what grizzly bears and what black bears ate. The students learned and practiced the Delketh numbers when they were counting bears and other items in the story. Leah has revisited this story throughout the year and will continue to do so a few more times before the end of this school year. Students were wondering, I wonder what the bears are doing now. And Leah used this as an opportunity to explore the seasons through these questions. And she asked the question, what do we do during this season? And what do bears do during this season? Students are enjoying this story and are very excited every time Leah revisits it. Musi Cho, for sharing your time with me today. It is greatly appreciated. I leave you to think about, what are you passionate about? How can you connect this passion to the Indigenous storywork principles? And what is your one takeaway from this presentation that will help to get you started?
Great, thank you, Jennifer. Very engaging questions for us to think about. I wonder, are there questions, comment from others?
Well, it was certainly a very interesting presentation, Jennifer, and I love the books that you were using, and I can see that, oh, most children would be so engaged in learning. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Lorraine. I feel very fortunate that we do have so many beautiful stories by local authors and illustrators.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think Andrea has a question.
Yeah, you mentioned that you kind of, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. You mentioned that you didn't really need to include the curriculum pieces, that the kids were exploring their own math. Are you trying to use the stories sort of exclusively for math and tying in as much as you can? Or are you just allowing those sort of curriculum pieces to emerge and then meeting the needs of your math learning outside of that?
That's an amazing question. And it depends on the teacher. So the different teachers did different things. Leah was really able to follow the students' interests. And it's amazing how students' interests often connect to the curriculum. And she definitely did a cross-curricular unit because there was quite a bit of science involved as well. And then also some beginning writing activities, that sort of thing. When I did my initial project, it was very prescribed. I had it planned out in my mind that I was using that story to connect to elapsed time. And that was me just beginning. And so I would like to continue to explore further, pausing and following the students' interests. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Okay. Kate, you have a question?
Thanks. I was just wondering, it's great that you were able to find books with local authors or illustrators. Do you have any recommendations that might make it easier to do that in other areas?
Yeah, Kate. So what I did was, we have a lovely local bookstore here. And so I contacted them, and they do their best to always have 1 or 2 copies of local stories. So please reach out to a local bookstore. And then you just have to start asking people, talking to librarians. Our local library could also be another place to help. I did spend quite a bit of time just talking to people and sharing, this is what I'm looking for. Do you know of any? And then just books that have been recently published. Also, I was constantly watching.
Right, thank you.
Kate, what district are you in?
What? What you want?
An independent school in North Vancouver.
Independent in North Vancouver. Yeah, just start talking to your colleagues, start asking people. I'm most passionate about people finding stories that are local, have a local connection to their unceded territories.
Yeah, thank you.
And I also think on our Indigenous Math Network website, if we don't have it now, we should have a listing of various books written by or produced by Indigenous authors and or communities.
I see also, Joanne, that Jess has mentioned in the chat that Iron Dog Books is on Hastings and it's Indigenous
thanks.
owned.
Yes, thanks. Yeah. And of course, there's Thetis, Indigenous Publishing Company, that has a number of books published. And I think, it's the numbers of books are increasing that are written by Indigenous authors. Oh yeah, Massey Books. That's what I was trying to think of that. That's an Indigenous owned bookstore too in Vancouver. Any other questions or comments?
I'll just mention also, Joanne, I have my email address. So if people think of questions or comments later, please feel free to reach out.
Great. Oh yeah, Strong Nations. Thank you. There are a number now that we can take a look at, and Strong Nations has a lot of children's books listed in on their website. Well, I do want to raise my hands in thanks and respect to Jess, Kyle, and Jennifer Dionne for sharing your experiences and creating lots of sparks for us as we think about ways to bring together Indigenous stories with math education, and seeing the pictures of students' engagement with story mats and their own drawings, and thinking of where math lives. I just love that question, what math lives here, and then also highlighting the various storybooks written and or illustrated by Indigenous authors too, Jennifer. That's very helpful, and also helping us learn a bit about how you each have worked with classroom teachers to engage with the stories and being a mentor in that role with the teachers and learning together. I think that's so powerful, a way that we are in a circle here, those of us in this circle A, learning from Jess and Jennifer, and hopefully you will take away, an idea or think about that question. What are you passionate about? What might you do next, tomorrow, or the next day in relation to what Jess and Kyle have shared with us. Jess, Kyle, and Jennifer Dionne have shared with us today there. So thank you, everyone. So our time went very quickly, but now you have a few minutes, a little aha break or whatever, and your next circle will start at 4:18.